morning sun unfurled golden ribbons across the polished marble floors of the Royal Palm Resort, casting a serene glow over its grand halls. Daniel Carter paused at the entrance, luggage in tow, feeling a surge of unease tighten in his chest, not from the weight of his bags, but from the surreal sensation of checking into his own hotel under an alias. The crystal chandelier which he had hand-picked 7 years ago after countless design meetings refracted light like a prism above him, yet from this angle, as a guest instead of the owner, it sparkled with unfamiliar detachment. Today, Daniel Carter ceased to exist. In his place stood James Mitchell, a fictional businessman from Seattle, hiding behind modest glasses and a freshly cropped haircut. The transformation was more than physical. It was emotional. He hadn't walked these halls in years. Meetings, mergers, and a relentless pursuit of expansion had turned him into a phantom haunting his own creation. "Welcome to the Royal Palm Resort, sir," a young concierge said with a bright, rehearsed smile. Daniel's gaze softened as he recognized her face, Sarah Chin, newly hired 3 months ago. She looked eager, diligent. He had approved her file but had never truly seen her. She had no idea who he was, and honestly, why would she? Most of the staff wouldn't recognize him, even if he introduced himself properly. That truth stung. "Thank you," he replied, his voice steady as he adjusted his glasses. "I have a reservation for a week." As Sarah tapped away at her keyboard, Daniel absorbed the atmosphere around him with an unfamiliar clarity. A young couple whispered in hushed frustration near the coffee bar, clearly upset about their room assignment. A child's tantrum echoed near the elevator, his father's nerves fraying with every passing second. These were the raw, unfiltered experiences of his guests, the ones he'd become blind to behind boardroom walls and investment summaries. "Here you are, Mr. Mitchell, Suite 1217, Premium Ocean View," Sarah said cheerfully. "Thomas will assist you with your luggage. Would you like a tour of the facilities?" His instinct was to decline. After all, he knew every inch of this resort, or so he thought. But something inside him hesitated. If he was to see this place through his guest's eyes, he needed to embrace the illusion fully. "Yes," he nodded. "That would be helpful." Thomas the bellhop was tall with an easy charm and practiced grace. As they walked through the atrium, Daniel saw what the spreadsheets never showed. The tropical plants lining the walkways were beginning to yellow. Near the spa, peeling paint curled slightly from the ceiling above the indoor pool. A cleaning cart squeaked painfully through an old service door that should have been replaced years ago. "The spa got renovated last year," Thomas said casually. "But between you and me, sir, the old steam room worked better. This new one takes forever to heat." Daniel's smile faltered. He had signed off on that renovation without ever setting foot on the construction site. That was becoming a pattern. Decisions made with data, not presence. Once in his suite, Daniel tipped Thomas generously and walked to the balcony. The view, at least, remained untouched. Waves crashing rhythmically against the sand, palm trees dancing gently in the breeze. He had built this paradise with his bare hands and vision. It had once been a crumbling motel. He remembered knowing every staff member by name, attending weddings and birthdays, solving leaky pipes himself when maintenance fell behind. Now, his phone buzzed. Another board meeting update. Another expansion plan. He silenced it. For the next week, James Mitchell would forget all of that. That evening, rather than dine in the polished, over-formal restaurant bearing his name, he chose the lounge. It was more intimate, designed to feel like an extension of home. Leather chairs, warm wood accents, and the soft murmur of a jazz trio easing into a mellow tune. The bartender, fluid and charismatic, spun cocktails as if choreographing a show. "First time at Royal Palm?" asked a woman seated beside him. She wore a sleek black dress, understated yet elegant. Daniel noticed the confidence in her posture, the familiarity in the way she swirled her martini. "Yes, he replied, sipping his whiskey slowly. "Though I've heard good things. It used to be the best," she sighed. "Still nice, but something's missing now. It lost that personal touch." The words hit harder than he expected. He fought the urge to defend himself, to explain the logistical complexities of managing a hospitality empire. But James Mitchell wouldn't know about management reports or investor expectations. "What changed?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "It's hard to say. The old owner, Carter, I think, he used to be around. He'd talk to guests, host events, made the place feel alive. Now, it's run by some company. The staff's doing their best, but..." Her voice trailed off. The gap between what was and what is spoke louder than words. Daniel excused himself and stepped into the restroom, his breath catching as he faced the mirror. Staring back was James Mitchell, a man he barely recognized. When had he stopped being the heartbeat of the resort? When had he traded warmth for profit? And as he turned to leave, a fragment of conversation from a nearby private booth froze him in his tracks. Conviction caused a drift of conversation drifted through the quiet corner of the lounge, like a dagger through silk. "The paperwork's nearly done. The board votes next week. You won't see it coming. He's never here anyway." Daniel's hand froze on the restroom door handle. His pulse thundered in his ears as his breath caught in his throat. It couldn't be, but every syllable had the chilling clarity of inevitability. He turned slightly, careful not to make a sound, and caught a glance at the two men in the booth. Both familiar faces from board meetings, the kind who smiled too widely and shook hands too firmly. A cold knot twisted in Daniel's stomach. They were talking about him. The realization hit like a blow to the chest. Not only were they plotting to remove him, they were right. He hadn't seen it coming. And worse, they weren't wrong about his absence. Back in his suite, Daniel paced restlessly, the ocean's rhythm outside clashing with the storm inside him. He had come here to reconnect with the soul of the resort, to find its heartbeat again. Instead, he had discovered betrayal buried in whispers and boardroom politics. He had been so caught up in building an empire that he hadn't noticed the foundation rotting beneath him. His own identity, once carved into every decision, every brick, had faded into a signature on contracts. He had become a stranger, and now strangers were poised to claim what he built. But James Mitchell still had time. The next morning, Daniel woke before dawn, his mind buzzing with possibilities and unanswered questions. As James, he had a freedom the owner no longer did. No one was watching. No one was shielding their words. He dressed simply, khakis and a fitted polo, his appearance blending with the early risers at the fitness center. At 6 a.m., the gym was already alive with motion. Through the glass walls, a canvas of purple sky gave way to glowing orange hues. Daniel walked on a treadmill, appearing casual, but his focus was razor-sharp. A pair of sharply dressed men lifted weights nearby, their conversations floating through the clinks and grunts. "That's Harrison," a woman whispered beside him, nodding toward a silver-haled man in immaculate gear. "He's on the board. My husband says there's big money shifting around this place." Daniel's steps faltered. Jeffrey Harrison, yes, he remembered him well. They hadn't spoken in months. Harrison now chatted animatedly with a younger man in a sleek tracksuit, who seemed far too focused for a vacationer. Every nod, every lean forward, it screamed of business disguised as leisure. After the workout, Daniel lingered at the juice bar, watching from behind his smoothie as Harrison and the younger man took a table nearby. "The Asian markets are eager," the younger one said, sliding a tablet across the table. "They see potential Carters missed. This place could be international by now." Harrison scoffed, shaking his head. "Always been his flaw. He plays it safe. No vision past this patch of sand." Daniel's heart clenched. They weren't just planning a coup. They believed he had become irrelevant. The very qualities that once made him a pioneer were now liabilities in their eyes. "Everything's ready for next week?" Harrison asked. "Michael has the presentations prepared. Once the board sees the numbers, the vote's in the bag." Daniel's stomach dropped. Michael, his CFO, his closest confidant, the man who stood with him through market crashes and hurricanes, now orchestrating his downfall. A text buzzed on Daniel's phone. "Emergency board meeting, next Thursday. Full financial review, requested by MH." The betrayal was complete. He had 6 days. The hours that followed were a blur of motion and observation. Daniel moved through the hidden arteries of his resort. The laundry rooms, the delivery docks, the maintenance corridors, and what he saw painted a picture bleaker than he feared. Staff grumbled about shrinking budgets. Suppliers argued over delayed payments. The little things, the ones he once obsessed over, were being neglected. In the resort's business center, Daniel discovered that Harrison and the mysterious younger man were frequently using a private office labeled Room 3. During a lull, Daniel slipped in unnoticed. In the trash, he found a discarded notepad page. Scrawled figures, profit projections, post-restructuring, and a name, one that made his blood run cold. Dragon Holdings. Back in his suite, Daniel dove into research. The firm had a reputation as predatory visionaries, identifying vulnerable properties, buying them cheap, gutting their legacy and repackaging them as sterile luxury brands for the global elite. It was hostile takeover masked as growth. His beloved Royal Palm wasn't just under threat, it was on the verge of becoming something unrecognizable. That evening, Daniel attended the weekly manager's dinner, something he had never bothered to attend in person as the owner. As James Mitchell, he posed as a potential corporate client and secured a seat at the table. 20 managers filled the private dining room, sipping wine, laughing, sharing ideas. Daniel's eyes found Michael at the head, his once vibrant energy now dulled, his smile mechanical. A tremor ran through his hand as he raised his glass. "We're proud of our personal touch here at Royal Palm," Michael began, voice wavering. "Our owner believes in upholding the highest standards of—" He stopped. His throat tightened. Daniel watched closely. Was it guilt in his eyes? Or fear? Conversations swirled around future expansions and renovation dreams. Excitement buzzed in the air. But every mention of growth made Michael's jaw clench, his knuckles whitening around the stem of his wine glass. Then from across the table, the young man from the gym smiled slyly. "Mr. Harrington," he said smoothly, "perhaps you could share a bit about the upcoming changes, the board's vision, perhaps?" Michael's grin was forced, his eyes flickered with something unspoken. "We're always looking ahead," he replied, but the warmth was gone from his voice, replaced by a cold script rehearsed too many times. And Daniel knew in that moment, Michael wasn't just involved, he was conflicted. And that meant, just maybe, he could still be reached. Evolving to serve our guests better, but the heart of Royal Palm will remain the same. A place where luxury meets personal connection. Michael's voice rang across the table, hollow and mechanical. The words, once imbued with sincerity and pride, now sounded like a memorized corporate mantra. Daniel watched him carefully. This wasn't the Michael Harrington he remembered. The man who could stir a crowd of executives with nothing more than a toast and a smile. That Michael had been bold, passionate, alive. Now his eyes were shadowed with something deeper than fatigue. As the dinner wound down, Daniel caught a glimpse of Harrison murmuring quietly to Michael, "Papers are ready. Thursday's vote is solid. Everything's in order." Michael nodded, but his expression told a different story. His hands trembled. His usual easy charm had vanished. He looked haunted. Later, back in his suite, Daniel sat on the balcony, gazing out at the same Pacific waves he'd admired for years. But tonight, they felt different, darker, colder. The twinkling resort lights shimmered across the water like a flawless illusion, masking the fractures beneath. His phone buzzed with another message from his assistant. Urgent, review documents before Thursday. The attached reports, untouched in his inbox for weeks, now carried the weight of life or death for his career, his legacy, and everything he'd built. He closed his eyes, inhaling the salty breeze, steadying the storm inside him. Tomorrow, he would face Michael, not as James Mitchell, not as a guest, as Daniel Carter, the man who had dreamed this place into existence, the man betrayed. But beneath that pain was a harder truth. Michael wasn't just a colleague, he was family. His best friend, the godfather to Daniel's children, a man who had stood by his side through fire and failure. The betrayal wasn't corporate, it was deeply personal, and Daniel needed to understand why. The next morning began in silence and urgency. With his laptop open, Daniel scoured years of financial data, tracing the hidden signs of decline. The numbers painted a grim tale. Profit margins slipping, occupancy falling, maintenance costs ballooning. But what truly made his blood run cold were 3 recent loans he'd never signed off on. Taken quietly, approved under his name. A knock jolted him. At the door stood Sarah, the cheerful concierge. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, offering a sealed envelope. "A message from Mr. Harrington's office." Inside was an invitation, lunch at the rooftop restaurant, the very crown jewel Daniel had built 5 years ago, with panoramic dreams and a rotating platform that offered heaven on a platter. He had spared no expense, pouring millions into it. Now it would host a conversation that could unmake everything. Before the meeting, Daniel made a detour to the spa. Something about the steam room upgrade didn't add up in the renovation invoices. The cost had ballooned beyond reason. Gloria, the longtime spa manager, welcomed him with warm hospitality, unaware of the storm brewing behind his polite smile. "The new steam room," she said, raising an eyebrow. "We didn't need it. Our old one worked perfectly, but corporate insisted. Brought in some new contractor, Azure Building Solutions, I think. Never worked with them before." Wasn't even our call. Daniel felt the ground shift beneath him. Azure again. The spa upgrade was a shell, a vehicle for siphoning money, a smokescreen for something far more sinister. Anna South. At precisely noon, Daniel stepped into the rooftop restaurant. Michael was already seated at a corner table, overlooking the vast, glittering coastline. He looked worn, defeated. His suit was wrinkled, his shoulders hunched under the weight of something he no longer had the strength to hide. "Mr. Mitchell," he greeted formally, rising. They ordered drinks. Michael launched into a rehearsed monologue about corporate event packages, flipping through a glossy brochure. But his hands shook as he turned the pages. Daniel waited, then spoke with deliberate calm. "Let's talk about Azure Dragon Holdings." The air froze. Michael's water glass tipped, soaking the pristine linen tablecloth. I think you do," Daniel said, removing his glasses, locking eyes with him. "Just like you know about Azure Building Solutions, and the 3 loans I never approved, and the board meeting Thursday morning." Michael's face went pale. "Daniel," he whispered, "how long have you?" "Long enough," Daniel cut him off, the betrayal crackling beneath his composure. "Long enough to know my best friend is trying to steal my life's work. So tell me, Michael, why?" Michael glanced around in panic, then leaned in. "Not here," he said. "Meet me 1 hour, the old maintenance shed by the South Beach." That shed was one of their earliest projects. Back then, it had been nothing but rusted walls and forgotten equipment. Now, It stored old dreams. Daniel approached it slowly, each step dragging memories behind him. Nights spent planning renovations, toasts shared over makeshift desks, promises sealed in sweat and laughter. Inside, Michael paced like a man under siege. "They have everything," he said as Daniel walked in. "From the first year. Every corner we cut, every inspection we rushed, every favor we pulled with the city, they have proof." Daniel stood still, stunned. Those early days were chaos. They had been desperate, short on cash, long on hope. But they had corrected those mistakes, or so he thought. "They also found the Anderson account," Michael added, pulling up files on his phone. "6 months ago, they came to me. Said if I didn't cooperate, they'd report it all. To the Gaming Commission, the tax authority. You'd lose everything. Maybe even face charges." He looked up, his voice cracking. "I tried to delay them, buy time. But eventually they demanded access. I thought I could control it." "So you gave them the keys?" Daniel snapped. "Let them place people on our board, open the books?" "I was trying to protect you," Michael shouted. "They were going to destroy it all, this way. At least the resort lives. You'd get a buyout. You'd walk away clean. I thought it was the only way left." Daniel turned away, reeling. Every ambition, every deal to grow the brand. He'd chased them all, and in that pursuit, he'd left Michael behind to carry the burden, to take the fall. "Thursday," he said at last. "That's when they move?" Michael nodded. "They have the votes. They'll reveal the real numbers. The board won't have a choice." Daniel breathed deeply. "How much is left in the Anderson account?" "About $2 million. A flicker of resolve lit Daniel's eyes. The beginnings of a plan began to form. Risky, dangerous, maybe even illegal. But it was a shot. Their only shot. "When's your next meeting with Azure Dragon?" "Tomorrow morning." Daniel smiled. Grim. Determined. "Perfect. Here's what we're going to do." The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows through the dusty glass of the maintenance shed. Dust motes floated like memories in the fading light, and for the first time in a long while, Daniel and Michael stood side by side, not as business partners or adversaries, but as brothers in arms. Their plan, fragile and dangerous, had the weight of everything they had built resting upon it. One misstep, and the dream they had carved from nothing would be gone. But in that dusty space, filled with echoes of old dreams and early ambition, something had returned. Trust. For now, it was enough. At dawn, Daniel stood at his suite's balcony, watching the staff filter in for their shifts, oblivious to the battle that loomed. He thought of their families, the morning routines interrupted by early clock-ins, the school runs coordinated with shift changes. This wasn't just about saving a resort. It was about safeguarding the people who gave it life. No more hiding. Daniel donned his sharpest suit, shedding James Mitchell and stepping back into the skin of Daniel Carter, not as a distant owner, but as a leader ready to fight for what mattered. His first stop, the security office. Frank Martinez, loyal head of security for 15 years, turned pale when Daniel walked through the door. "Mr. Carter, we thought you were in Singapore." "Not anymore," Daniel replied, closing the door. "Frank, I need access to 6 months of camera footage, and I need your absolute discretion. Everything that happens today stays between us." Frank didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir." As footage loaded, Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Azure team arrived early. Meeting moved to boardroom. Something's off." Panic tightened Daniel's chest. They were improvising, accelerating. He had to move. "Frank, freeze that." Daniel pointed to grainy footage of Harrison exchanging something with 2 familiar figures in the parking garage. "Can you enhance?" Money, quiet voices, the unmistakable image of corruption. "Download everything," Daniel ordered. "And the spa renovation footage, too." His phone buzzed again. "Bay knows." Daniel cursed under his breath. "Frank, patch me into the resort-wide PA system." "That's only for emergencies, sir." "This qualifies." Moments later, in the executive boardroom, Harrison's voice rose in fury as Michael refused to sign the final agreement. Then, Daniel's voice echoed through every hallway, restaurant, and guest room. "Attention all guests and staff. This is Daniel Carter, owner of the Royal Palm Resort. In 5 minutes, I will be making a public announcement in the main lobby. It concerns everyone in this building. I encourage all guests, staff, and especially our visitors from Azure Dragon Holdings to attend." The lobby flooded with people. Curious staff, confused guests, and the Azure delegation trying to maintain composure. Harrison and Bay arrived last, flanking each other like generals, but their postures betrayed tension. Daniel stood on the grand staircase, heart pounding. "For the past week, I've been living here under a different name, trying to reconnect with the soul of this place. What I found instead was a betrayal. A hostile attempt to strip this resort of everything that made it special, through blackmail, fraud, and corruption." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Daniel held up a tablet. "These men exploited old mistakes, coerced my CFO, and bribed government officials." Bay stepped forward, voice tight. "Those are serious accusations. You'll be hearing from our lawyers." Daniel didn't flinch. "They'll be busy. Frank?" Security staff handed out tablets to board members, each showing incriminating footage. Harrison in the parking garage, documents signed under coercion, financial trails back to Azure's shell companies. Harrison lunged forward. "You can't prove." "I can." Michael's voice rang out, stepping into the light. "Because I recorded everything. Every threat, every meeting, every wire transfer." "You recorded us?" Harrison spat. "That's illegal." "Not when it's evidence of criminal conspiracy," Michael countered. "You'd know that if you'd actually read the legal training you insisted I take." Daniel stepped forward. "I'm offering a choice. Withdraw your bid and leave this property, or we go public. Regulators, law enforcement, the press. Your choice." Silence fell like a curtain. Even the fountains seemed to pause. "You'd risk your own resort," Bay said quietly. Daniel looked around at the faces that made this place a home. "This isn't just a business, it's a family, and I protect my family." An hour later, Azure had pulled out. Harrison resigned, followed by 2 others. The cancer was cut out, but the scars remained. That evening, Daniel found Michael in the lounge, the weight of years resting in his slumped shoulders. "You knew it was me," Daniel said, sitting beside him. "Eventually. You ask questions like an owner. And you still tap your watch when you're nervous. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Michael looked at the glass in front of him, untouched. "Because you had to see it for yourself. What we almost lost, what we forgot." Daniel exhaled deeply. "And left you here. I chased my next dream, while you fought to hold this one together." They sat in silence, watching the gentle flow of guests, families, couples, lonely travelers, each with their own reasons for being there. "I can't stay," Michael said finally. "Not after this, trust. It's broken." "I understand," Daniel said, voice thick. "But I'll always be grateful. You didn't betray me. You saved us." Michael stood. On the bar he placed an old tarnished key. "To the maintenance shed," he said. "Keep it. To remember where we started, and what's worth fighting for." The next 3 weeks brought transformation. Daniel moved out of the penthouse and into a small office near the staff entrance. Every morning he joined housekeeping briefings. "East Wing renovations start next week," he announced. "But this time, Every department has a seat at the table. Maria, the housekeeping lead, raised her hand. The hallway carpets, Mr. Carter. Too pretty, impossible to clean. Daniel smiled. Then you'll lead the flooring team. Pick something beautiful and practical. He launched new programs, an employee council, anonymous feedback, reallocated funds from the Anderson account to staff benefits and training. One day, a familiar face appeared in his doorway. Mrs. Reynolds from the bar on his first night. "I've seen changes," she said. "Feels like it used to. But is this real or just for show?" Daniel led her to the window. Below, Thomas helped an elderly guest with luggage. Sarah trained a new concierge with patience and warmth. "I lost my way," he admitted. "Forgot that hospitality isn't thread counts and menus. It's about people." She nodded. "Then maybe we'll stay. I'm planning a global conference next spring, 300 rooms." Daniel didn't flinch. "Before you commit, meet our events team, the ones who actually take care of your guests. They'll tell you what we can really do." That week, Daniel launched monthly town halls. "Our occupancy is up, but more importantly, employee satisfaction is at a 5-year high. That's your win." When asked about expansion, Daniel shared a smile with Gloria. "Not more properties, more opportunity. Starting next month, we'll train local students in hospitality. I want Royal Palm to grow deeper roots, not just wider branches." Later, in the kitchen, Chef Marcus handed him a spoon. New sauce, local ingredients, classic style with a twist. Daniel tasted it. Familiar, yet new. Exactly what Royal Palm had become. Back in his office, he found a resignation letter from Bay, along with a flash drive full of data on Azure's other targets. Daniel turned it over to the authorities. "Because some battles go beyond your front gate." On his desk, the old maintenance key still waited. A reminder of who he was, and who he never wanted to stop being. On Daniel's desk, encased in a simple shadow box, sat a weathered key. The one to the old maintenance shed. Beneath it, a new plaque bore the resort's evolved motto, "Luxury is personal." That night, as Royal Palm settled into its familiar rhythm of twilight jazz, clinking glasses, and ocean breezes, Daniel walked the halls, not as an undercover boss or a distant executive, but as a man who had found his center again. A steward of not just a brand, but of a living, breathing community. From the lobby, he heard Sarah's melodic voice as she welcomed a family, her tone wrapped around them like a warm blanket, making them feel as if they'd arrived at a second home. In the lounge, Thomas, technically off duty, was guiding an elderly guest through a video chat, helping her connect with her grandchildren. The moment glowed with kindness. These were the moments that truly mattered, not profit margins, not expansion charts, but tiny miracles of care and connection. The resort wasn't just surviving anymore. It was radiating something deeper, a spirit renewed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. That was the nature of hospitality. But Daniel was ready, because he finally remembered the truth he'd lost in the noise of growth. It wasn't about the building, it was about the people inside it. Exactly 1 year later, the Royal Palm Resort hosted its first annual employee recognition gala. The ballroom glittered, not just with chandeliers chosen by housekeeping for beauty and ease of cleaning, but with pride. Every table was decorated with floral centerpieces designed and grown by the grounds crew in the resort's new greenhouse. It wasn't just a party, it was a celebration of identity. Daniel stood at a podium, gazing out at the sea of faces, chefs, concierges, engineers, bellhops, and families. Some in uniform, others in evening gowns. All of them carried the unmistakable glow of purpose. "A year ago," Daniel began, "we faced the greatest threat to this resort. Not a market crash or a new competitor, but the slow erosion of what makes hospitality meaningful. We forgot that the soul of this place doesn't live in marble floors or star ratings. It lives in you. The screens around the ballroom lit up, highlighting milestones, record guest satisfaction, industry awards, national features on sustainable luxury. But Daniel waved toward them gently. "Those numbers are just echoes," he said. "The real story lives in the quiet heroics, a scavenger hunt created by our Bell staff for tired kids, maintenance innovations that inspired guests to take sustainability home with them. That's our story." He gestured toward the front table. "We're joined tonight by a very special guest, Mrs. Reynolds. Her global conference set a new standard for what we can accomplish when we lead with heart." Mrs. Reynolds, radiant and proud, raised her glass in salute. Around her, executives from her company, now loyal returning guests, nodded with respect. "And one more person," Daniel smiled, eyes locking onto the crowd. "Sarah Chin." The spotlight found her, now the head of guest relations. She blushed as the room applauded. "Sarah, your kindness to James Mitchell reminded us that every guest matters, no matter what name they give at check-in. You reminded me why this place exists." As dinner was served, Daniel visited every table, not as the CEO, but as family. At the kitchen team's table, Chef Marcus introduced his daughter, now proudly enrolled in the apprenticeship program. At the housekeeping table, laughter broke out over photos of their newly opened wellness center. Later, in his office, Daniel sat quietly. Around him were framed guest thank you notes, staff celebration photos, and words next to the old maintenance key, a guest comment card framed under glass. It read, "For the first time in years of luxury travel, I felt like I wasn't just staying at a hotel, I was being welcomed home." His phone buzzed, a message from Michael. "Saw the news about the certification program. You did it, my friend. Not just saving the resort, but making it better than we ever imagined." Daniel typed back, "We did it, all of us." Outside, bathed in moonlight, a family arrived late. The kids were cranky, the parents clearly exhausted. But within moments, Daniel watched as Thomas bent to the children's level, spinning tales of secret gardens while Sarah expedited check-in with practiced grace. Slowly, stress melted into relief. Strangers became part of something greater. Daniel turned off the light and walked the halls. In the kitchen, the overnight crew was prepping for breakfast. In the lounge, the last notes of jazz faded into silence. At the front desk, the night shift welcomed guests with the same warmth as the morning. Tomorrow would bring more decisions, more problems to solve. But tonight, Daniel Carter slept soundly. Not because the work was done, but because he wasn't doing it alone anymore. The Royal Palm Resort hadn't just survived a hostile takeover. It had remembered who it was, and in doing so had become something greater than any brand name or profit sheet could define. A place where people didn't just stay, they belonged.